I had to stop listening to Joe Rogan um, because I was becoming a conspiracy theorist. Honestly, uh, that might shock people. I come from probably one of the biggest conspiracies ever, which is Christianity. And now I consider myself atheist. By the way, hey, my name's Timmy Gibson, former fundamental evangelical tongue talking Holy Ghost rolling pastor. Did that for 30 years. Spent 48 years as a Christian, an evangelical, a charismatic Christian. And during, I think it was like 2020. So if you're new to my channel, I've told my whole story in multiple videos of how I became an atheist, kind of that journey from fundamental conservative, Bible thumping literalist, meaning I believe the Bible was literally true, to now being an atheist, and what that kind of, like, what was that journey like? Kind of what were the steps that got me or brought me to the place where I'm at today. While Joe Rogan early on was actually helpful, because despite what Christians say, I mean, Joe Rogan, he's not a Christian, and he's not going to be becoming a Christian either. I'm always so shocked when Christians, it's like they want to jump on, like, anytime anybody even says anything like that's even remotely Christian, Christians jump on it and make videos. Joe Rogan is talking about Jesus more than ever before. He's going to be a Christian. He's not. Uh, anyway, so in 2020, I think at that point I would have called myself spiritual, not religious. And I think that's kind of when I got turned on to the Joe Rogan experience. I feel like my son told me about Joe Rogan, maybe even earlier than that. But I don't think I really started listening to Joe Rogan until um, about 2020. Anyway, I initially really enjoyed the Joe Rogan experience. I think Joe Rogan is probably a super cool dude. He seems like a really cool guy. Uh, but I really did have to stop listening to him. I probably stopped listening to him within the last year. And I mentioned this in another podcast or another episode of my channel here. And but I didn't quite go into a lot of detail of exactly why. So I at one point I was a climate change denier. I was an anti-vaxxer. I was real uncertain whether we went to the moon or not. I definitely thought that the 9/11 could have been an inside job. Um, what else did I believe? Um, oh, I never believed that, like, the lizard people. I never believed that. I believe the election might have been stolen way back when. Um, what else did I believe? There were several big conspiracies. I started kind of thinking maybe the Anunnaki. And if you don't know anything about the Anunnaki, they're like the aliens that um, potentially, advanced chimpanzees into making us or something like that to mine gold. I didn't fully buy into that, but I kind of was. What else did I? Now, granted, when I say I bought into it, I never talked about it out loud. just kind of like a closet conspiracy theorist. You know what I mean? Um, and it came at a really interesting time because, I'm walking away from the number one biggest conspiracy theory ever, which is religion, Christianity. And so I'm definitely like, I'm in that space in life where I'm uncertain. I don't know. Uh, it's like I was so vulnerable to filling the void or filling the emptiness that was Christianity. You pull out the Christianity, and all of a sudden, there's this emptiness, there's this void there. And I kind of had to look to, or I was, not that I should have, but I did. I was looking to some conspiracy theories, but really, honestly, it was because I was listening to Joe Rogan. And again, blessings to Joe Rogan, but he is so conspiratorial. I mean, I believe JFK. There was way more to the JFK than Oswald, whatever the guy's name is that did it. His name skipped my mind, but who did the there was a lone gunman. Like it was, yeah. Now, let me just say this: I am also aware that the government isn't honest about everything. Surely there are some things that they're keeping a little hidden. Obviously, there's corruption in the world. I mean, it's like they say, most conspiracy theories will have like a little grain of truth to them, but then they just expand. Like the moon landing. you know I seriously questioned the moon landing for a minute. um, Now, the one I never believed, and I thought it was just completely, what's so funny about conspiracy theories is all of us are probably believing some conspiracy, right? I think I've heard that said, that probably everybody has some belief that's a little conspiratorial. I remember hearing someone talk about 5G and chemtrails and adrenochrome. I think it was Jim Caviezel, which I'm shocked. I hope he has gotten away from that. But Jim Caviezel, I saw a video of him talking about um, the blood of children being harvested for the adrenochrome, uh, that was like to help the Democrats stay young, or something. It was something like that. And I was just like, what the like what the hell are you talking about? Like, it was like some conspiracy, like lizard people. Like, I never believed that. I never. In fact, I at the time I had a good friend who 100% believed uh, that Biden was that wasn't the real Biden. That was a body double. That he had a look-alike. Michelle Obama was actually a man. What else? Yeah, there was a couple others that I was like, no, that's nuts. But so here's, let me say this. By the way, cuss and discuss down below. Let me know anything that you were kind of conspiratorial about. And I'll tell you, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some things that I'm still a little bit conspiratorial about. Uh, I can't think of what it might be, other than I'm not big on knock on wood. I'm sitting at a wood table here. Knock on wood. Uh, I'm lucky to be 56, just turned 56. and April 14th, actually. Anyway, which is today. Happy birthday, right? To me, I think. Is it the 14th? Anyway, um, what did I say? Knock on wood for? Oh, I'm, 56. I don't take any drugs uh, outside of recreational stuff, but um, I don't, again, knock on wood. I don't take high blood pressure medication. I don't have to take, you know what I mean? I'm lucky, and I've said this probably before. I attribute that to just, I'm pretty healthy and I eat healthy and I'm not a big drinker and smoke outside of a cigar here and there or whatever. Um, and yeah, so like, but it's not because I believe there's some conspiracy or there's some government whatever. Now, do I think pharmaceutical companies could be could be not honest about some things? Well, obviously, of course, right? Clearly, we know that for a fact. And I never thought that there were, um, chips in the COVID vaccine. I never thought that. Uh, for me, I've always been a person, you know, if you've watched my videos at all, if you haven't, you don't know this, but because I've told the story already in another video, there's no point in going into the details now. But years ago, in my mid to late 20s, I was pretty ill, and I made some big health changes, and resolved all of it through healthy eating, exercise and all that kind of stuff. So I'm a big proponent. I'm not a vegetarian or anything anymore. I was a vegetarian for a while. Uh, I believe in all things, moderation, and we only get one life, as far as I know, right? I don't know if there's such a thing as past lives. I don't believe in that, but I also don't know, right? Uh, it doesn't seem like there's any evidence for life beyond this. This is it, right? Like, this is it. And so, on one hand, I want to live life and I want to experience things, and who doesn't want a piece of carrot cake, which is my favorite. Who doesn't want a piece of carrot cake, or who doesn't want, an old fashioned here and there, excuse me, or as a, you know, for me, excuse me, um, I love cigars, and so I maybe do one cigar a month, one every couple months. Just depends on what my schedule's like, and you know, obviously the weather now the weather is such that I can do that more. So I'll probably be doing a couple cigars a month now, because I can sit out here and do it. In fact, if I'd have thought about it, I'd have brought one out here with me. Uh, yeah. So let me get to the point. I Again, no shade on Joe Rogan. Dear Lord, that guy's got a freaking huge podcast. He's doing his thing. It's great. That's just so cool. But I personally had to stop listening to him because I believe that we're fed through what we see, what we hear, who we hang around. All those things play a role in what we think, who we believe. You know what I'm saying? And I personally find it critically important to uh, not be believing lies, as well as not wasting my energy of thought on things that are either misinformation or fake news or whatever you want to call it. I just, I felt it's almost like I feel like you can be poisoned with conspiracy thinking, Um, so yeah, so for me, that's why I had to stop listening to Joe Rogan. Is I just found myself being more skeptical of the government and the deep state and vaccines and the pharmaceutical companies and and again, I realize that there are some shenanigans. Clearly those things have been for the most part exposed, we know that, but I also just don't find it helpful to be paranoid that Bill Gates is in charge. Right, or now uh or I don't know. I personally just, for my own sanity, honestly, if anything, I had to stop listening to Joe Rogan for my own sanity, as well as to keep a good grip on things. And I'll tell you what I like to make sure to do is and I'm not saying I never listen to Joe Rogan. There are occasions that I will. Uh, I'll tell you who I really enjoy listening to is there's so many different people. Honestly, I love Alex O'Connor. I love his channel. Um, I like Derek over at Myth Vision. I like his stuff. Tim with Harmonic Atheist, The Thinking Atheist, Seth Andrews. I mean, a lot of those channels are some of the channels. Michael Beverly was one of my first interviews that he interviewed me. Cults to Consciousness, definitely some of those for sure. But when I think about like experts, or not just experts, but people on all sides. I love listening to Sam Harris, Making Sense podcast. I love listening to Michael Shermer on from Skeptic Magazine. I love Michael Shermer's stuff. Um, it kind of it keeps me on Earth. You know what I mean? Like it keeps me planted on, keeps my feet on Earth. I just again I felt that because I was like a real faithful, like I was a big fan of Joe Rogan's. I listened to his stuff. Well, every episode. I mean, every episode except for there was a few that I'm a ring announcer, for MMA, so I'm in that world too. Uh, some of those interviews I found interesting. Some of them I just didn't. When he interviewed, MMA fighters, I liked more the science guys, and I liked Graham Hancock's stuff. Um, I'm not saying I believe all that stuff hook, line, and sinker, uh, but I definitely found it interesting. That was definitely fun. There's another dude that Joe had on his show. And it's like this. I also went off on some tangents where I thought that the pyramids were um, power stations. And I'll be honest, that's probably a conspiracy theory that I'm still probably still potentially uh, bought into a little bit, if I'm honest. I find the pyramids to be so freaking amazing. Those are just modern marvels. It just seems awfully wild that they would be tombs when I think that they said they didn't find any burial stuff in there outside of or outside of yeah. So I did the deep dive on that back in 2020 21. That they were like energy sources. Uh, the pyramids, I'll be honest, those are something that I find pretty spectacular and pretty mysterious still to me. And I've watched all the stuff. I've watched the stuff from the History Channel, also all the, you know, but it's still too bright. Uh, so I've definitely I've done my fair share of deep dives. I find go Deply Teppy, go Dep. Now I can't say it now that I'm being put on the spot. Go Deply Teppy. Um, like I find that stuff just fascinating, right? Um, but at the end of the day, I'm personally on a journey of truth. You know, that's again that's what led me away from Christianity. Is that when you do the deep dive on it, it just it becomes clear that oh, yeah, okay, clearly this has been doctored and messed with, and it's clearly a human man-made construct. Which granted, that doesn't mean there's no God. I've never said I've said I don't believe in God. I've said a lot of things. I don't think I've said that there absolutely is no God. I don't know that. Uh, Pretty certain there's no Bible God. Like, I'm pretty certain about that. But whether there's something else out there in the universe, right? How could I know? How could you know? How could anybody know? And I used to think as a Christian, I'd be like, just look around. Like, it's clear. There's a God. Just look around. And now it's like the exact opposite. Now I'm like, yeah, look around. Read the Bible. Clearly, there is no Bible God. Like, it's just as easy and clear to see, right? Uh, yeah, so that's it. Custom discuss below. I am curious, where do you stand on, you know, uh, did you wrestle with any of the vaccine stuff, or did you wrestle with, the JFK assassination, the moon landing, 9/11, any of the conspiracy theories? I'm sure I'm missing some. Michelle Obama being a man, like whatever conspiracy theory that I'm curious what you may have bought into. I think that I was just susceptible to these wild beliefs because I had been a Christian for 48 years and believing a bunch of bogus BS. So it was kind of easy. It's funny how, and it seems like a lot of conspiracies are believed by Christians. It seems like, and I'm sure there's conspiracy theories on the left and clearly and on the right. I mean, there's conspiracy theories everywhere, but uh, it just seems to me that the conspiracy theories are just rampant in the church. Uh, the government can control the weather, and chemtrails and the 5G stuff, and cabal and the Bill Gates stuff. And I mean, yeah, sure, of course, right? There's shady stuff going on in our world. I mean, I don't think anybody would be silly enough to deny that. But yeah, I don't buy into, for the most part, I don't buy into conspiracy theories. I believe we went to the moon. I believe that JFK was assassinated by one dude. That's where all the evidence is, what it points to. Could there be something else? I mean, maybe, right? But there's no evidence for it, clearly. 9/11, there was something that Michael Shermer said on the interview that I just did with him. And I thought it was interesting because conspiracy theories intrigue me. But he said, oh, like Princess Diana. He said, no one wants to think that she just died in a car crash because of drunk driving. Like, that's just too like it's too clear cut. It's not fanciful enough, right? It needs to be something deeper, and something nefarious and something sacred. Here, I'm hoping to get a conspiracy theorist expert on my show. I'd love to interview someone that's a conspiracy theorist expert, which Michael Shermer probably is. And we were up almost to 2 hours of talking, and I was running out of time with him. And so I'll have to maybe contact him about another interview and just talk about conspiracy theories alone. Uh, but I probably watched, I don't know why I'm yawning. I probably watched 12 hours last week of video, um, people talking about, like psychologists talking about the psychology of conspiracy theories and who typically believes in conspiracy theories and just all that stuff. I'm very fascinated by that world for sure. I've said this before. Like I have friends, I even have family who question the moon landing and question 9/11. They think it's an inside job. Yeah, crazy. So let me know down below what conspiracy theory that you might believe in, as well as do you have family or friends who have bought into some conspiracy theory? Peace, everybody. Cheers.